The following podcast includes explicit content. Listener discretion is advised.
I must address you, the listener. You're the person who chose to listen to this garbage. You've begun listening under the assumption that this was only a simple little baseball podcast. Little did you know you've now entered the HOTO zone. It's time for Heart of the Order.
Welcome to Heart of the Order, where the three best guys get together and talk about baseball. We're going to have some live cave exclusive information tonight. We'll get through that later. Before we get there, my co-host, the three amigos, Richie, Mac, how are you guys doing this evening?
Wonderful.
Delightful.
Nothing better than recording a podcast at Disney World.
Yeah, before we get really into it, you're in Disney World. You're living life. You are down where the weather is fantastic, probably, compared to here.
Yes.
You were hanging out at Michaela's house the other day. You're just down there roaming around. How is Disney World? How's everything doing? And overall, are you enjoying your little staycation down there?
Yep, back to school in about a week and a half, so I'm trying to not think about that. But, yeah, the weather's like 75 and sunny, so can't really complain there.
75 and sunny. 75 million? Sonny Gray.
Ooh.
Is that going to be our biggest acquisition this off-season? We are getting a lot of tidbits, and it's hot, it's cold. They're playing coy. Is John Mozeliak done? Are they going to settle with what they have? Mac, I'm going to bring you into this conversation. You've been Mr. Optimistic, as always, all off-season. Are you still there?
Before Mac talks, I need to acknowledge that transition was not planned at all. That was really impressive. I had to say that.
Really good.
That was really good. Sorry, Mac, you can continue.
No, it's all good, man. Fair point. It was a good transition. It was kind of like well thought out. Yeah, man. Still optimistic. I don't know, man. Like the way I listened to John Mozeliak talk today on Ackerman, very coy, very cerebral of what he was saying, very precise about what he was saying, right? I felt like it was interesting that he didn't mention a couple players that could have factored into the roster for this coming year. He specifically had mentioned that he was kind of chilling with where the pen's at right now. Said that, and the one thing that I took out of the interview in general was he refused to shut doors live. Richie, I don't know if you had the opportunity to listen to it yet, but the man just consistently goes out of his way to acknowledge that he's not ready to close doors yet. And he keeps mentioning that there's time left and stuff. Now, while he did admit that most of the week this week is going to be focused on the arbitration numbers that we'll be discussing back and forth between the club and players, he acknowledged that that was going to be kind of like the focal point of where they're going to be at the Brain Trust Tuesday through Friday. So I would have to imagine if he's going to do something, it would be either sooner than later or later than sooner. So somewhere after the arbitration hearings potentially, or something as quickly as maybe going into early Tuesday. I don't know if there's anything that definitively happens in that time frame, but I don't think the Cardinals are done just yet.
I don't know if we're going to have a ton of action this week, but I agree with what you say. Monday, Tuesday might be pivotal. And as far as something happening quick, now, it doesn't have to happen quick. There is a lot of misdirection going around. We have my fraudulent reporting, and you pair that with some of the things coming out of the Athletic, whether that's Ken Rosenthal's report tying the Cardinals to cease and Katie Wu backing that up. But then you have John Ditton reporting that Mo's telling him they're not that active in starting pitching. And I think if you break down the wording to that, I think that's truthful. I don't know if really anybody in those markets have been that active because of how Chicago's been acting. Miami's still feeling everything out. There's only so much activity that you can do. So I would say that if that was just based on merit, he was being honest. Now, when talks start getting heavy, and if they are in the mix as being reported and as what I've heard, then the activity will come. And I'm okay with the bullpen as it is. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but if the bullpen has no more additions, I'm content. Do I think it could be better? Sure. I would really like a Jordan Hicks reunion, or maybe an addition of like a Hector Neris. If you wanted to go on the left-hand side, there's a few arms available. You also have, the hopes and dreams that we had of Josh Hader, which I don't think that's going to be a thing. So, I mean, the bullpen, there are names available if the Cardinals wanted to spend a little bit more money on the quote unquote right deal. But
If I may add just a smidge on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of with you, man. The way I look at the bullpen currently constructed, I still think that there's a lot of upside in a lot of what we haven't seen, right? So a lot of the guys that we acquired, as in Nick Robertson, Ryan Fernandez, Riley O'Brien, those guys were very, very successful at AAA, in a defined role, right? So I think that if you were able to kind of look at the way they're penciled in to getting an opportunity or having an opportunity, I think it'll bode very well. Especially because it looks like the Cardinals committed to one direction when they were targeting pitching this offseason. They went with guys that are very, very heavy on sweepers. I don't know if there's something analytically they love about that pitch in the front office, like when they're doing their pitch strategy, their sequencing, and then just the overall effectiveness of the pitch itself. But if you look at like Nick Robertson, like he arguably has 3+ pitches. Like his fastball is good. He's going to sit in a consistent velocity. His changeup's really good, and then he's got that sweeper that it seems the Cardinals really went after this offseason. I'm chilling with it. I think that they can continue adding on the starter or reliever aspect of it, and I think it would make me more comfortable. But I mean, we cannot deny like the metrics itself. Like adding 47 quality starts to a rotation that needed a lot of help. And the Cardinals statistically won 70% of their games last year when they had a quality start. So you can look at a lot more wins when it comes down to it if you want to really be honest with yourself.
Those are good points, Mac. But I think another thing we need to recognize is a healthy Ryan Helsley totally redefines like what we have in our bullpen. We did not have that last year.
Same with Gio. If you get a bounce back year from him.
Right. A healthy Ryan Helsley, changes everything. It would have helped tremendously last year. So
we blew 26 games last year, like save wise. So you're absolutely right, Richie. If you get a Ryan Helsley that it goes back to his 2021 form, before he was injured in the wild card game against the Phillies, then you're looking at a very dynamic bullpen.
And I don't want to overlook Palante either. I know his name is often overlooked and set aside, but at his peak, Palante was a very instrumental piece in this bullpen.
Yeah. He surely wasn't used right last year.
If he could have a resurgence and be a key element, whether that's with a lead or down by a couple, or even coming in as a specialist against left-handed hitting, which I mean for some reason he's extremely well against. I think that the Cardinals have the key ingredients to say, okay, this is our bullpen, and let's do it. And when you have what's available in the starting pitching market right now, and really all the main guys are still available, there is reason to believe that, yes, you haven't been as active in the starting pitching market, but now you can be. Because out of everything else, you can argue that the Cardinals could be done. They've cleared out their shopping list, they've gotten their needs, and they're set. And they can spend the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of allowing the market to take shape and see if something falls in their lap. And they don't have to have any urgency. You know, some teams that are talking to cease need to get something done. If Chicago continues to negotiate the way they do, it could be a waiting game. Same thing with Cleveland. Same thing with Miami. Miami is not even 100% sure they want to trade their pitching, but they do have to get some offense, and that's the best way for them to achieve it is by trading some of their starting pitching. It may not even be Luzardo who they end up trading, but I think they're listening on a few of their pitchers. It just seems like there's only a few names that are going to get the pieces that they need. So the starting pitching market, you can say, well, of course you haven't been that active. There was no reason to be that active. It's an honest statement. But I think the next couple weeks ahead, I think it's going to be telling. And the fact that at the start of this 2-week window, we got a lot of confirmation from in the live cave for myself, and when it gets hit by the Athletic and Ken Rosenthal, for me, that's validation and it's encouraging. I don't know if you guys are fans of Foul Territory or if you watch it, but old friend alert Jack Flaherty was a guest on the podcast, and he brought up some interesting tidbits, essentially took blame for some of the things that happened to Wilson Contreras, some of his comments that he made. He believes it got blew out of proportion, and Wilson Contreras suffered because of it. And then he kind of backtracked what he meant. I don't know if either of you were able to catch it. Rich, I'll let you start. What is your reaction if you were able to catch it? Were you able to catch it?
Yeah, I saw it. I was a little bit more intrigued by the replies from Cardinals. Some people seemed pretty upset over it, but I thought it was a mature way to approach it. I mean, he came out, he seemed to, tackle it in a respective way, kind of took a little bit of blame for it, didn't fully, I thought it was mature. It didn't, I don't know, there were some people on Twitter that were a little upset by it, but I thought it was a decent way to handle the situation, and it's good to have a little bit more clarity on it. I feel like we were still a little bit in the dark up to this point as to what happened with all that, but yeah.
Mac, I don't know. Were you able to catch it yourself, sir?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I mean, like you can look at it in Richie's angle. Like he did own up to it, right? That was a pretty mature thing that he did. But at the same point in time, like, why did it take him this long to fucking own up to it? Like, you got homeboy benched who had the largest free agency contract in Cardinal history. You literally got him benched because you fucking shot your mouth off. So yeah, I mean, thanks for the apology, Jack, but you really fucked your teammate in the long run, and that's not really a good way to go out in Cardinal Nation, to be quite honest, man.
I think he knows he's going to be pretty irrelevant in Detroit this year, so he wants to put his name in the hat a little bit, get out there.
I mean, I appreciate the maturing aspect of him. That's like what I wanted to see of Jack Flaherty when he was in St. Louis. I really thought if he would have hit that maturity stride with like Adam Wainwright working with him and Adam Wainwright going out, I really thought that could evolutionize the pitcher that he ultimately would have become in St. Louis. And I think he would have kind of like immortalized himself to the fan base just because he would have embraced a change. Like the guy that talks about embracing change and shit and Mamba mentality and stuff, like it's not really like abiding by your own beliefs by kind of what you just did. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything, but like you're such a hypocrite on what you claim you believe in. So I don't know. Like I said, thanks for the apology, man, but that was kind of a bitch move.
This is where I'm going to insert a sound effect from Mortal Kombat. And it's going to finish him.
Finish him! Flawless victory.
Oh, Lord.
I don't know what the smell around this house is, but I smell bullshit. You're going to tell me? No, Flaherty.
Oh.
That's the most bullshit cop-out answer I've ever heard in my entire life. That little fucker knew what he said when he was on this team. He meant what he said when he was on this team. The Cardinals would have not benched him. Do you think they went off a couple comments to make such a drastic decision? No, they called the pitchers in individually, asked them their opinions, and those opinions caused Wilson Contreras to lose his job. It wasn't a simple comment or a headline, and all of a sudden the Cardinals took one of their highest contracts ever gave 3 months in and bench him. Do you think the Cardinals are that? They have some problems, but do you think the Cardinals are that unwell ran that they would take a few comments and make that kind of decision? Absolutely not. They talked to those guys individually. They threw them under the bus. I think Jordan Montgomery is one of them. I think they squashed it towards the end. But Flaherty, there was a reason why Jack Flaherty was part in that room with Adam Wainwright when they had the come to Jesus moment with him. When Adam Wainwright says, we just put our arms around him and we told him we loved him. That man threw that other man under the bus. And I think it's a situation where Jack Flaherty has let his entire career and his entire hopes and dreams of what he wanted to accomplish in this game, skill-wise and financially, it has slipped from his fingertips. And he's being humbled. He's hoping to take a 1-year deal to get back on track. But he has this how things ended in St. Louis and the reputation that has followed him. He decided this is PR. I'm going to correct it. I'm going to own it. But he wasn't even honest in his statements.
3 very different opinions. I think we know what to expect whenever Jack Flaherty comes up. I think we know what to expect from you, the live. But
because I've been the only one right about him this entire time.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I still like Jack Flaherty. Like, I like him a lot more than he came out and kind of owned up to it. But like I said, it was kind of a bitch-made moment in St. Louis. It really flashed his immaturity here, and it's not going to be received well. I'll tell you that right now. I still wish him the most success in Detroit, though. I hope he comes back this year. I hope he has a great season. I don't hate him as a person. I just think that he really did Wilson Contreras dirty. I really do.
Yeah, there's no denying that.
I don't hate Jack Flaherty.
You know what I'm saying?
He
can come back from this.
I don't hate Jack Flaherty as a person. I don't. But there are other things about him and the decisions that he's made, and it continues to happen. It continues to happen. And kudos to him on taking the blame at the end of the day, but it's a little too late. And I think Wilson Contreras is going to be better off not being teammates with him. And that's something Jack Flaherty is going to have to deal with. Because when you're someone who can't be coming into the locker room and you make that team better, you leaving makes that team better, which I believe it will. That says more about you than Wilson Contreras, buddy.
If I may add to that point, just one moment. If you look at when Jack Flaherty was traded at the deadline and Wilson Contreras was playing free, Wilson Contreras was kind of like playing on an MVP trajectory towards the end of the year. The second half that he had was really, really good. If that's the Wilson Contreras that you just signed for 5 years that's going to come in this year, carefree, having a really good chemistry built within the clubhouse and kind of solidify that. You got rid of Andrew Kisner, who was probably his biggest competition when it came to clubhouse, influence and stuff like that. They promote, Ivan Herrera as the backup pitcher right now. It's going to have a very, very different clubhouse feel this year because of what they addressed in order to rid the toxicity in the clubhouse from last year. I think we're going to see a very, very different Cardinals team, and I think we're going to see a very successful Cardinals team this year.
I agree with you, and not to interject because I know Richie probably wants to talk. I think it has a lot to do with what the names that the Cardinals have brought in. Everyone likes to throw around the age and in certain aspects of some of the guys that they got. But I've said this earlier in the offseason, the Cardinals went out and got 3 guys that know themselves. They're sure of themselves. And is that a byproduct of having Wilson Contreras as their catcher? I'd say so. And you could say, well, that's unfortunate that the Cardinals have to build a pitching staff like this because of Wilson Contreras, but at least the Cardinals understand what they need to do, and they're diagnosing their team. If them bringing in this sort of staff, this veteran leadership staff, and they think that will work with Wilson Contreras after they've made that commitment to Wilson Contreras, I mean, for me, that's an intelligent move. They're putting themselves in position to be successful. You could argue that if the Cardinals went out and got a bunch of 23, 24-year-old kids that are still learning the game and would likely have to rely on the catcher and and having the catcher guide them, you could maybe be setting yourself up for failure again. So I think there's underlying reasons why even the Cardinals went in the direction that they did that really aren't talked about, but are kind of there. It's almost the elephant in the room that we're not acknowledging. And it's, hey, we might be getting these guys because of who our catcher is, and the guys that we got, they can hold their own. They don't need Wilson Contreras to call them the game. You know what I mean?
Well, not only that, but I mean, Wilson, like, let's not, like, I feel like Cardinal fans are so quick to forget that Wilson Contreras has won a World Series. This guy really does know what it takes in order to succeed in the playoffs. He was part of the fucking only Cubs franchise win in the last century, like when it comes to winning the World Series. And he did as a rookie. So, I mean, the guy does know what he's talking about. And, like, I think just interjecting that veteran leadership within the clubhouse and specifically on your pitching aspect, like, we all want to just jump and be like, oh, yeah, the Cardinals are geriatric. Their pitching rotations like garbage and stuff like that. But it's a lot of guys that have been here before, a lot of guys that have playoff experience, a lot of guys that just go about the game the right way. And I like the competitive edge that they've instilled. It will not surprise me in the very slightest if the Cardinals literally do just pop off this year and shock the world with the rotation they currently have constructed. Because everybody's going to be in the same boat. Well, they didn't pay the rotation money that the Dodgers did. But baseball's a very funny sport, and you can win 120 games and still get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. I mean, it happens.
Richard, do you have any kind of 2 cents to put in on the rotation?
No, I think you nailed it on the head. I honestly, I don't know what to think anymore. I've been so many different places as far as, where we're at. So I don't know what to think, to be honest. I think I'm just kind of playing the waiting game.
Well, let me ask you, I'll make it simple then. Are you excited to still have Wilson Contreras as your catcher?
Oh, yeah. Dude, Wilson Contreras is awesome.
He's a boss. He is a boss. And I got into an argument with somebody over saying that we should have made the deal for Sean Murphy. People don't realize what an atrocious second half Sean Murphy had. Okay? Sean Murphy got off to a really good start. And this was happening simultaneously with the downfall of our pitching staff and all the things coming out, and then his benching. So all the bad with Wilson was happening while Sean Murphy was taking off. But then Sean Murphy was one of the least productive offensive catchers in baseball for 2 months to end the season. Believe me, he was on my fantasy team. God. Wilson Contreras blew up, and all of a sudden their numbers are comparable, but down the stretch Wilson Contreras played phenomenally, and it was the guy that we signed him for, and you could tell he was getting comfortable. And to your point, Mac and Richie, I wonder if it's because some of these names that we discussed previously have gotten out of the clubhouse and they're no longer around, and it's almost a fresh start for him. And I think he came into his own. I think he became one of the leaders on the team. I think Michaelis really stepped up and they developed a relationship. And I think some of the bullpen guys really rallied behind him. And then you had Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt kind of pull him in. And if you looked in the dugout, you saw those 3 guys standing together all the time. I think as bad as the season was, towards that second half and as the season ended, when they weren't playing for nothing and everybody was just ready to go home, I think finally there was a bonding moment. And I think they finally came together and became a team. And I think hopefully that spills into this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And I'll kind of transition into this question here. I know you put out in the live cave, or maybe it was just on your Twitter, but keys to success kind of thing with a tier list for players, what you would expect out of them. I'm kind of curious both your thoughts on what do you think is the biggest key for this team? What's going to make them a successful playoff team?
I'll start since it's my list, and then we can go to Mac and Richie. You can round it out. And I want to go off my list to answer that question because I took that tier list and I thought about it in a way where I tried not to make the tier list in a way where the best players are the most important. Ultimately, it kind of shaped out that way to an extent, but there are several names on there that I think are so important. Um, One, you touched on it earlier, Richie, the health of Ryan Helsley. I think that's going to be imperative when it comes to closing out games. We talked about the struggle of that earlier on in this podcast. I think that is so important. Sonny Gray. I mean, he is our number one pitcher. He's going to have to pitch like a number one pitcher. He's going to have to be talked about in Cy Young conversations. That's what we're paying him for. That's what we want him to be. I hope he can continue to be that guy. If he is, the Cardinals have a true number one. Nolan Arenado. Nolan Arenado cannot start the season the way he did last year. He has to come out and be like he was in 21. Came out and won NL Player of the Month in April. One of my bold predictions. We're going to do two of those after this podcast is recorded for number 8 and 7. I think Nolan Arenado has to come out and be that type of Player of the Month for April. He's going to have to repeat that. He's going to have to come out of the gate hot. And my last one to round out my S tier was Wilson Contreras. And I think it's because it's his second year as a Cardinal. I think it's time for him to be a real leader on this team. And because some of the distractions are behind him, I'd like to see that strong second half turn into a strong first half for this team. And I think if we can get like a Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, and Wilson Contreras just starting off hot and not have to go through any early growing pains, this team has the offensive firepower to go toe-to-toe with anybody in the National League.
For sure. I'm going to be quick with mine, so I'll get it over with. But if I had to say my key to success for the season, and let's just pretend like we're looking at the roster from, January 7th. So who knows? Usually after we record, we make a big signing the next day. It seems like that happens. But as of January 7th, I would say the key to success is going to be your 4-5. Gibson, Lynn, and Matz, if Matz ends up in the rotation. Those guys are going to have to win you some baseball games. That's my key to success. I think you know what you're going to get from this offense. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that this offense isn't going to be one of the top echelon offenses in the MLB. So I think you know what you got there. Lynn and Gibson are going to have to step it up and hopefully find a way to get through 6 innings and, put the team in a position to win baseball games, which we didn't have last year.
So I have Lynn and Gibson right now in my C tier, and I have Steven Matz in my B tier. Of keys to like most important, not talent, most important.
Mm-hmm.
If you were making a tier list, if we were editing my tier list, would you move Lynn and Gibson up to a level or two, or would you keep them at C?
If we're talking about expectation, I would probably keep them in C. If we're talking strictly off of what I think we need from them, but if we're putting them in an A tier, it doesn't mean they're going to be, Cy Young contender. If I'm putting Lance Lynn at an A tier, he doesn't have to win a Cy Young. He just needs to win you some baseball games. He's not, I think you know what I'm getting at there, but
yeah,
the expectation isn't as high as it is for Sonny Gray. So, I'd probably move him up to at least Lynn for that matter in A.
Okay. Mac, your keys to success, player individually, or what are you thinking?
So probably like in my top tier of like keys to success for the offseason leading into the postseason would be Nolan Gorman. Does his back truly hold up for a full season split between DH, second base, etc.? Because we see what kind of player Nolan Gorman can be, like with a ceiling. He can be a 40 home run hitter. In fact, there was a statistic that was put out by Codified the other day that Nolan Gorman overtook all second basemen in average home runs by at bat. He finished with 16 ahead of like Ozzie Albies. So Nolan Gorman has like all the potential in the world, and we've been shown that truly in the postseason, you need a power left-handed bat that can change the tide of any situation. Like, we understand that there's like 80% of the pitchers in baseball are right-handed, but when it comes to the postseason and things that really matter, you're going to face like a lot of left-handed pitching. You're going to face a lot of good right-handed pitching, and you need somebody that's dynamic, like Bryce Harper, like Kyle Schwarber, who literally can turn the tide of the game. So Nolan Gorman is like probably in my top tier of just like, can his health sustain and allow his success to happen this year? Another key to success is Sonny Gray, leading the rotation. I think Wilson Contreras is going to be fine in the catcher's position. I think he's going to contribute offensively and defensively in calling the game the way the Cardinals organization sees fit. But I also think that you need Sonny Gray to literally come into your rotation and be able to guide them. And the one thing that he really said during his press conference when he signed with St. Louis that rang true to me when he talked is he talked about wanting to be the guy that leads the staff. Like, he wants to lead the staff to the promised land. And I think that edge and that compete, as long as that doesn't go away during the season, I think that he is the key for success of not just personal success, but leading that rotation to be better than they truly are.
Yeah, I agree. Sonny Gray is super important, and like I said, Wilson Contreras is good. And Nolan Gorman, I got Nolan Gorman in the A tier. I didn't put him in the S tier only because, I looked at the S tier as the guys that you just absolutely need to, to produce. And I have Nolan Arenado in there, and I even put Paul Goldschmidt in the A tier. And I was struggling only because it's like, dude, do we need him in the S tier? Do we need him in the A tier? And I could see this offense being productive without Paul Goldschmidt. I think Paul Goldschmidt's the cherry on top. I think a hot Paul Goldschmidt with a hot of everybody that's supposed to be in the S tier, that's when you start becoming elite. But if as long as Goldie can put up serviceable numbers and gets a couple ticks back to where he was, I think that the Cardinals are going to be looking in good shape, at least offensively. And I can respect the Richie's opinion on moving some of these guys up on the Gibson and Lynn. I kind of put them in there because in my head it's like Lance Lynn and Gibson, they need to be important, but then I was thinking to myself, are they as important as Tommy Edman and Steven Matz and Mason Wynn and JoJo Romero at the back end? Are they as important as Matthew Liberatore taking the next steps, or Andrew, who we just got from Tampa Bay, if he's going to be put in high leverage situations? I put Michaelis in the A tier because he is going to be our number 2 pitcher. I put Brendan Donovan and Nolan Gorman side by side because, look, if they're going to be our second baseman / utility guys, DH guys, they're going to have to produce if they're going to keep both of them. Lars Nootbaar needs to take the next step. This offense is not going to be successful without him being successful. And, a lot of pressure, but I put Jordan Walker in the A tier. His bat's going to need to play, and he's going to need to be better defensively. He's going to have to take strides out in the outfield, but his bat is going to have to play because if his fielding is average or below average and he's not hitting, then, he's a tough guy to have in the lineup. And that's the reality of it. I think he has a lot of pressure coming into this offseason. Before we transition to the next topic, Mac, I want to have you check your mic again. You were bubbly talking about your last thing.
You chilling now?
But when you were talking about all that, were you moving around a lot?
No, I'm sitting still. I'm just sitting here chilling, dude.
Do you use Apple headphones?
Yeah, I use AirPods.
Try to have the mic closer to your mouth and talk.
Well, how do you do that?
So the
Behind your ear, bro.
What?
He has the wireless ones.
Yeah, the wireless ones. So
you have pods?
Yeah, the pods.
Oh, I understand.
I got a question for you guys before we.
Yeah, what's up?
Do you want to? I mean, I was gonna make it a part of the podcast, but do you want to do like bold predictions, and then I have another little quick question.
Yeah, you can ask me what my 7 and 8's gonna be tonight, and or we could just do one wild bold prediction.
Okay.
Let's do that.
So we got two more things here for you guys. First off, just another quick question I have for you guys. Who's your leadoff hitter? If I know it's a very fluid thing, the lineup for clearly the Cardinals like to switch things up all the time, but if you're right in the lineup, opening day is tomorrow. Who's your leadoff hitter?
For me,
You've got options.
I have a ton of options.
Mm-hmm.
You could really make this lineup balanced. You can play with it. What I want to do this year, though, if I'm writing it, I want consistency. And as I go back and forth between two main names, one being Lars Nootbaar, the other one being Brendan Donovan, I guess if they're both on my team, I would go with Brendan Donovan. If you were to ask me what I think we should do, I think we should trade Brendan Donovan in a package to receive starting pitching, therefore making Lars Nootbaar my everyday leadoff hitter.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're both on my team, I'm picking Brendan Donovan.
Mac?
Sorry, Richie. What was your question?
Who's your leadoff hitter? If
Brendan
tomorrow's
Donovan.
opening day. Brendan Donovan.
It's Brendan Donovan all day, bro.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And live to your point there, I know you have been reporting that we're, kind of floating around and starting pitching, but do you think they're scared to trade Brendan Donovan? Do you think that's a guy that they're, kind of, I feel like that would be a guy you'd be worried about getting rid of just because of the flashes that he's shown, improvements in power, that kind of thing.
I don't think it's necessarily they're scared of trading Brendan Donovan. I just think they really like him. I think the reality is the Cardinals would move on from him. I think they would move on from Nolan Gorman for the right deal. But I think this is what it comes down to. If the Cardinals are going to offer Brendan Donovan to Miami for Jesus Luzardo, it's likely still not enough from Miami's point of view. Miami's probably going to want more. The Cardinals have just done something in their mind that is hard to swallow. So they see Brendan Donovan and his value higher than probably an outside team will perceive, even though it's still going to be perceived high. So for the Cardinals to justify trading Brendan Donovan, it has to be for the right piece. But then for that team to say, okay, we got you to trade Brendan Donovan, but that's not enough. Sometimes that's when deals fall apart. I don't think the Cardinals are dim-witted to think that they can get someone like Luzardo for just Brendan Donovan. But I think it's the reality of them knowing that they have to trade Brendan Donovan plus. I think that's what makes these bigger deals or including him in packages hard because of the value that they see and the value he does bring to the Cardinals. I think that's what it is. It's nothing to do with being like trigger scared.
Yeah, no, fair point for sure. Next up, I guess the last thing, unless you guys have anything else, bold predictions. Mac, I know you kind of shot one in the DMs the other day. I don't know if you want to talk about that one, but then we can go to live.
For what, that we're going to make a move happen?
I guess that
kind of
could be one. You can talk about that one, and then we can go on the season.
Yeah, no, I think specifically if I was to guess, like with a bold prediction, I think the Cardinals will acquire one of Cesar Luzardo. I think there's been way too much smoke around those two guys, specifically with what Derek Gould's kind of reported, what Live has kind of talked about, and stuff like that. And I think, like, when you see some of the other teams that you see rumored in those markets, like Baltimore, Boston's been kind of like rumored to like be lingering around and stuff. the Cardinals probably have like the most beneficial situation when it comes to what they'd be willing to part with than these other teams. Like Baltimore doesn't have a track record of just trading off their top prospects, and I don't know if that starts now. Atlanta, like they went out and acquired Chris Hale, so I mean I don't think they're really in the market for Dylan Cease anymore or Jesus Luzardo. The Yankees, I'm not sure the Yankees could beat us in a package unless they were just like Miami was just drooling over something that they have. I just think the Cardinals are in a really good position when it comes to what they have depth-wise, and this is like still a clear need. If you could pair, like, if you go out and acquire Cease or Luzardo and pair them with Sonny Gray, this really transitions your team from, like, maybe being middle of the pack in the NL to being a top-tier team in the NL.
Looks like we got some breaking news live in the live cave. Breaking news, Oscar Teoscar Hernandez signing with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Wow, they do it again. Every time we record.
Should just record every night.
Incredible.
Well, good for them.
Instant reaction on that. I mean, the Dodgers add more to it. The National League gets even more competitive. They're going to have the pitching staff and now the offense to compete with anybody. Are you guys just like exhausted by now?
Money does not matter. $23 million 1 year. That's just shocking. I don't know what to say. It's not surprising. I think we kind of saw the writing on the wall when they had the offseason they did last year. So I'm not extremely surprised by the offseason they're having, but it almost kind of gives you the feel that something's going to be done to kind of level the playing field. I mean, if you're the Cincinnati Reds, how do you compete if you don't luck out in the draft? Like, what do you do? So,
see, this is just another reason. Like, if this does not push the Cardinals or any other National League team to go out and get more pitching, I don't know what will. These offenses are becoming juggernauts. Dodgers and the Braves and the Phillies, you need pitching. And the Diamondbacks are no slouch. The Giants aren't going to be no slouch. Who knows in our own division what it's going to look like. But, the schedule is different. You can't beat up on your division anymore. You're going to go out and play the big boys. And I sure hope you have the team to do it. I do. It's going to be hard.
Mm-hmm. Bold prediction.
Talking. All right, let Mac do his bold one.
Mac, for the season, what do you got?
My bold prediction?
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Walker is going to be a 2024 NL All-Star.
Okay.
Dude, it's going to happen, man. I can see it clearly where Jordan Walker just comes into the season on an absolute fucking heater. He looked good last year at the plate. He looked good at the plate last year. Contrary to your point earlier, Jordan Walker made major strides in the outfield last year through repetition alone. Working with Willie McGee and getting to those extra reps at the end of the year when our team sucked ass was absolutely beneficial for Jordan Walker. He looked like a completely different outfielder, in the last quarter of the season than he did in the very beginning of the year. And his bat showed up last year. So I look for big things in Jordan Walker's sophomore season, and I think it'll lead to him being a 2024 All-Star.
Let me get yours before I do mine, Richie. What's your bold prediction?
I've got a couple, but I'll just stick with, I guess, the one I feel most confident about. I feel like Nolan Gorman. I know we talked about him earlier, but I really think he's going to have a good year. I would just say Nolan Gorman's going to be an all-star, starting second baseman for the National League this year. But aside from that, I think we're going to see guys take some bigger steps, like Alec Burleson statistically, he was the unluckiest hitter on our team last year. I think he could be the defense isn't there, but a very good bench bat for this team. Other guys, hopefully we can see Dylan Carlson, another guy who hopefully can take some leaps and, fill in for the outfield whenever we need him. So Nolan Gorman, all-star second baseman.
I'm going to do two. I'm going to do in season, and I'm going to do, kind of like Mac did off season. My bold prediction is the Cardinals acquire Dylan Cease.
Hopefully.
I was trying to pick between Jesus Luzardo and Dylan Cease, but I picked Dylan Cease.
And to be honest with you, I think that Dylan Cease is a much more likely target for the Cardinals, specifically because I do think that you could land him for primarily a prospect package, where you wouldn't have to trade Nolan Gorman or Brendan Donovan. You wouldn't have to gut the core. And I know that I often conflict myself on this because I don't think the Cardinals willingly go out of their way to target Boris clients, but they have had success trading for Boris clients in the past, to include Jordan Montgomery. So just because he didn't re-sign here, that has nothing bearing on the 2 years that he'd be able to provide you. And the Cardinals are like in a win now window. So
do you want I don't want to overshot it. I don't want to do too many. Do you want my offensive bold prediction, or do you want my pitching bold prediction?
I want to hear offensive, but first, of the $23.5 million, $8.5 will be deferred from 2030 to 2039 for Teoscar Hernandez.
LA's starting
for 1
to
year.
piss me off.
Yep.
Oh my God, dude! Someone needs to investigate them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so here we go. My offensive prediction. Shortstop, Mason Wynn, Rookie of the Year.
Wow.
If you're going to go bold, baby, go bold.
Yeah, that's pretty bold.
My pitching,
That's pretty bold.
I'm going to go ahead and do my pitching one too, because it's even bolder. You ready?
Ready.
Starting pitcher, Lance Lynn.
Oh, don't say it.
Gets Cy Young votes.
Okay. And that's all for horror. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, I'm going bold, baby.
That is very bold. So, I don't know if Mac wants to comment on that, but...
Breaking news.
What?
Yeah.
The Cardinals just signed Woo Sucko to a 2-year contract. I'm sorry, man. There's no way to top it. I don't think Lance Lynn gets Cy Young votes. I think he has a good year, but I don't think that happens. I think Live is making bullish predictions. It's not even midnight yet.
Well, if he's right, though, he'll clip it and use it forever. But my last question for you guys. I haven't been around a ton lately, so I've got tons to talk about. But where does Lucan Baker, what kind of role does he play on this team? Do you think he's on the roster this
I think he's
year?
potentially traded, dude. I think he's potentially dealt. I think in a very real situation, if the Cardinals do if they're really, really in on Dylan Cease and there's a real shot of acquiring him, I see him as the exact type of player that Chicago likes. They want a lot of power. They're very intrigued with power prospects. Lucan Baker has shown massive strides in his improvement at the plate, specifically at the minor league level. I think that he would be playing in a pressure-free zone because Chicago is not expected to be good for a little bit. And I think he's somebody that could really flourish there.
Yeah, that's a good point. He just feels like a guy that's kind of floating in no man's land right now. He had a lot of hype around him, home run after home run last year in AAA.
If you look at the White Sox organization, they were really enamored with Frank Thomas. Okay, not saying they're their same player, but they do have a lot of similarities to their game. Lucan Baker is a primary guy that you would probably see at DH first base and provide you absolute pop in your lineup. Like Lucan Baker has a really unique raw power trade, to be quite honest. The ball just sounds different when he hits it.
Yeah, and he doesn't really have a place on this team if you're kind of looking into what the future holds for guys like Goldschmidt and, potentially moving a guy like Nolan Gorman over to first at some point. Who knows? But yeah. Live?
I think he's a 4A player. It will be a throw in anywhere, or maybe a deadline trade. It'd be hard for me to see him get traded this year. I don't know what Chicago's going to want. I think they're going to look at, if they look at anything, I think they'll look at a couple of our pitchers and then maybe like a Thomas, a JC, or even a Chase Davis with a Tink Hens or Takeo Roby. I think that's really what it looks like now, and maybe the price drops to where you only have to include one of those guys plus one of those outfielders, and then maybe a lower piece. It depends. But Luken Baker, to me, I think he's just a 4A player. Like, I don't have like a lot of high hopes for him. I think he might have a couple serviceable seasons in the major leagues once he finds a team he can play on. But overall, I don't know. I feel the same thing about Moises Gomez. You got Luken Baker. Those guys, I think, are going to be at the major league level soon. I don't know if it's going to be on the Cardinals. I think they're going to be kind of a throw-in trade. So you have your main package, and then they're just like that lower-tiered part of that package. And one of them could come back and be one of those things where it's like, oh my God, we let him go, just because he can, maybe both have the power to hit 25 to 30 home runs. So those kind of journeyman guys, and it's hard for me to think about them as part of just like the overall roster. I think Luken Baker, if Paul Goldschmidt gets hurt, might be able to, help out a little bit on the club. I don't know if Moises Gomez will ever see the light of day at the major league level. I guess it just depends.
Did you see that Teoscar Hernandez just became the next Bobby Bonilla?
Yeah, dude. I'll have to look at that a little bit longer. I'll have to look at that more.
$8.5 million deferred to be paid out from 2030 to 2039.
It's
This
so
dude's
crazy, man.
This dude's gonna be getting paid still when I'm damn near 40 years old. I'll be wait, hold on. I'll be fucking almost 50.
And it's a 1-year deal?
Yeah.
Dude, I don't get this.
It's a 1-year deal with $8.5 million deferred for 9 years.
Yeah.
And they've spent officially over $1 billion this free agency period.
So I want to end this episode, and I know you guys know what I talk about when I post this stuff because we've gone over it, and it's not the first time I've had to explain this, but I've gotten a few DMs and a few comments that essentially is wondering what I meant by this, asking me if I know players and what player information is being sent over when teams are. And the reason why I'm touching on this is because almost like simultaneously we're getting these reports from Miami and Chicago with St. Louis. When guys are when teams talk and they start talking about certain guys or players available, a lot of the times what they'll do is they'll start in certain categories. So like your top 10, your top 20, your top 30, and what positions they play. So like do you have somebody in your top 20 that's a shortstop? Or do you have somebody in your top 50 that's X amount of years old in this outfield? We looked at some of the stuff. This guy caught our attention. And like they'll talk about hundreds and hundreds of players to build a package around. And then there's some names that other teams are familiar with. There's some names on your team that the other team knows nothing about. But then they'll look at some of the underlying numbers and the statistics and the metrics, and they'll like what they see. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, we looked here and we looked there, and player X, he caught our attention. Player Y caught our attention. And these are all names that the Cardinals have already almost made available. Like we will talk about this segment and this segment. So Chicago will come in and go, okay, well, we want to look a little bit more. What do you have on them? A lot of the times, if trades will get serious or there is real interest, the team with that player, that prospect, or you sometimes younger, will send over some of their information that they use, whether that is information they use to draft the kid, or if that player has been given certain developmental like goals and what he should be working on or what he needs to work on. The Cardinals can elect to choose that with the team if the team so requests that information. And usually that only happens if those two teams are trying to build a package of players and that team is trying to learn more about that player. Now, the Cardinals do not have to share everything. They can say no to everything. However, most teams won't say no to everything because a deal will never happen. It's trading baseball cards. If I wanted to trade you my baseball card, I wouldn't hold my card and never let you see it. I'd let you inspect it. The same thing happens with players. They give the access to files and information in order to see if that team is interested in trading for that person. They get like past 24 months of information of what they've been doing. It's the same thing when the Cardinals just traded for Andrew from Tampa Bay. They got an extensive list of information. They knew where he was after Tommy John. They knew what he was working on. They got an idea of how Tampa Bay felt about him. That is like one of the biggest steps in any trade, any deal making process. And there are certain departments within the Cardinals organization that specialize in getting that information over to their departments. When this happens, I find out 89.9% of the time it is happening with Chicago and it is happening with Miami. Now, I do want to caution and say that the Miami information came in first, but it was not as extensive as it was with Chicago, meaning there were more, I guess there was more requests from Chicago side for the Cardinals than it was from Miami to the Cardinals. That could mean one of two things. One, the Chicago is trying to dive into more players that the Cardinals have, whether that be a bigger package or they're really trying to comb over every little nook and cranny to see if a deal could work, see if something that they really are interested in. Or it could mean Miami is looking at, for example, if they're looking at a Brendan Donovan or Nolan Gorman and they're trying to round out the package with one or two prospects, then it won't be as a bit extensive of research as it would be if Chicago is trying to build a package of 4, 5, 6 prospects to be sent over. But the point of the entire update and why it is such a significant update is because this is past preliminary. This is past dialogue. This is past open discussion. This is allowing an organization into your organization to comb over your players that you are discussing with that team in making a trade. Everyone always thinks like trades are like these like non-complicated things where I offer you X and Y, but then you counter with B and C. That and it's just a continuous offer. That's not how it works. Weeks, maybe days of conversation on big trades generally happen, and you talk about a X amount of players. And then once you get to a familiar of these are the players that I'm willing to talk about, if that team is still interested and you haven't said no to too many players, then that team will essentially build their own package for you to submit them, and you can choose to submit that package or alter it a little bit, and that's when negotiations happen. So like when teams are in negotiations and those are the updates that you hear, like White Sox and Cincinnati are deep into in negotiations. They've already gone through all these steps to where they're trying to take 6 players that the teams both have agreed upon and combine them in a package. You have to go through this step that I'm telling you they're in with Chicago and Miami. Once you get through this step, then you would call it deep discussions. And that's how a deal goes finalized. That's how you come to an agreement. So the next step that the Cardinals would have to take with a team like Chicago or with a team like Miami would have to comb through all these guys, and now you have 5, 6 guys that can get a deal done with of some combination that can get a deal done with Miami or Chicago, and it's about agreeing of who of those 6 will make it work. And that's when you get a finalization. That's why I don't think a lot of people understood the gravity of that update. I think you guys did. I don't know if some in the cave understood the significance of that update. So I wanted to end the episode by hopefully hitting it home of what a big deal that update was.
Congratulations. You've actually finished listening to this bullshit.